This is our second ever Systems of Release panel, which is a magazine that Cooper and I started about a year ago. Was a very small idea, and then we made it into like a 20-page magazine, and now it's going to be even bigger, and here we are. And we're in Kartik's beautiful home. Yesterday we had an amazing panel with DJs Against Apartheid. It felt so good, so inspiring, invigorating, and feels like the perfect like housewarming to you, Kartik. So thank you again for having us here and letting us do this in your space. But yeah, so today we wanted to do a panel focused on femmes, non-binary, and queer people and DJs in the scene. And we have a few very lovely people who I think are big lights and shining figures in the space right now and are changing things. And we want to do a bit of an introduction. Well, first, my co-moderator, Gretel. Thank you for being here with me. But
Thank you for having me.
I want to start off with KYRUH. I've been like watching you play for so many years, and it's crazy to think that your first like official gig was in like 2021, I think it was, like right after like clubs were opening up. And I think I saw you like first at like Transpicos, and I just remember you being so friendly, and you're just really been on the come up, getting gigs like crazy, and it's really amazing to see you just come up like that.
Super sweet, thank you.
We have January.
DJ Infohazard is the founder of the Kitty Collective, a queer hardcore party. And she is a friendly face in the nightlife scene, and we're really excited to have her with us.
Yeah, I think I remember the first time I ever went to Rash, you were bartending there, and I just kept seeing you out and about, and I was like, okay, that person, I want to keep an eye on them. And then So, Detroit born, you got
Actually,
your...
I was born here, but...
Oh, you were born here? Oh, shit.
I moved when I was an infant.
Okay, word, okay.
If we want to be technical.
No, let's give you the credit,
New
and
York
let's stay technical, please.
New York born and Detroit raised.
Yes.
There we go. And I think you got your start like in experimental performance art, yeah?
Yeah.
And that informs a lot of your music making and whatnot. And then if you want to give Katie.
Then we have Katie Rex, who's been DJing for over a decade and founded Rex Projects and the infamous Bound Party, which is a fetish party, sex work positive, and queer, and has a residency at Basement.
Yeah.
As well as other cities around.
So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it. And I think kind of bouncing off yesterday and just the collectiveness and all the talk of resistance and the movement within Palestine and DJs Against Apartheid, I wanted to ask, first of all, in what ways do you guys experience your identity as resistance? Are there any moments for you, or even day to day? What does that look like?
Yeah. Should I start?
Please go for it.
I'll take the reins. I would say that obviously identity plays such a huge role in everyone's artistic practice. I mean, in my experience, my artistic practice is like an exact extension of myself and everything that I embody. And so from everything from my day-to-day struggles or trials and tribulations with my own gender dysphoria or euphoria, that actively plays a role into whatever sort of medium that I'm experiencing. And so often it's sort of this weird thing, liminal space that I constantly exist in, where everything feels a bit surreal sometimes, but then also sometimes I'm incredibly just tapped in, which is like an active projection or reflection of how I feel on a day-to-day basis as well. And so that sort of, intersection from identity struggles or, euphoria, definitely has like a huge impact, across the board in everything.
Mm-hmm, certainly. And I remember also kind of going off what you're saying, the way it reflects into your music. I got that chance to interview you, KYRUH, a couple weeks ago with Coop, and you talked a lot about that too, and the way it informs your identity. It's like inseparable. You can't like go without it.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, like, the question was making me think a little bit about, I read this, like, short story a while ago, and it was about, like, 1930s, like, census data for, like, Black and brown people in, like, inner cities. And it was, like, a short story talking about how, like, that census data, like, it captured, like, the number of people, like, living in these slums and in these homes. And it didn't really, like, capture a lot of the essence of, like, what was going on in these slums. And it was sort of like the person writing the short story, who I'm blanking on, it was like a Black woman. She was saying, like, they would come into the homes and take data about, like, how many people were living in, like, one small room, but they didn't, like, talk about the curtain, the beautiful, like, fabric curtain that was, like, covering, like, a broken window, or, like, how the one, like, beautiful teapot that was in the house was, like, passed down from, like, a grandma from, like, for generations, and that's, like, the one thing that they have. And the whole point of, like, the short story was sort of about like, finding beauty is resistance. And I think that's, like, always been a really, like, important part of being, like, identifying as femme and as Black, and not having those things separate, that finding, like, the beauty in the hard times and in, like, all of the things that are sort of stacked against us. I think that's so important, and I think that's really what draws me to, like, this scene, this music. It's like so many of us, like, come from these, like, vulnerable backgrounds, or these backgrounds that are not necessarily mainstream, and this is sort of like a place where we can, like, live in the beauty of, like, how each of us are, and it can change, and it could, you know, be different and on different days, and it's really, like, a wonderful experience. And I sort of, like, I can't, like, separate that from myself or my music, or, like, how I am when I'm out in the scene, you know?
Of course not. And I'm sure it feels like even that much more, like, empowering when you're going with that stuff and having that at the forefront of what you're making on a day-to-day. Do you ever, like, with Bound, I know that can be, like, sometimes people see, like, fetish wear and sex work as abrasive, and that in itself is a resistance. What's your experience been with that?
Yeah, myself, I'm a pretty masculine person, and I've done a lot of exploration into the taboos of femininity. So I've really kind of, like, harnessed this rebellion in, like, bimboification of myself. And when I first started, I was, like, just wearing, like, lingerie, because, you know, in 2011, it almost seems, like, ridiculous to even, like, think that this was a taboo, but it was, like, just a complete cis male dominated landscape. And, you know, gay parties were completely separate from straight parties. There was no intersection. So if I was going to offend people with my presence anyway, I might as well take the next step and continue that. So that's kind of, like, the root of how I started and continue to function.
You said taboos of femininity. What does that mean to you? That's interesting. Give me a rattle off a few for me.
Femininity is celebrated in one aspect, but people are disgusted by sexuality. It's, you know, we live in a really puritanical society. I think nightlife culture, you know, outside of, like, our niche, suffers, like, immensely with misogyny and looking at, you know, I, like, have a sex work background at different times in my life, and the way that men try to hide their attraction to feminization, or, like, extremely, like, feminine people, or if women outwardly express that, like, even like the things that Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion go through as, like, women of color who, like, outwardly express, like, desire. It, you know, seems palatable because we consume it, but it's, like, actually very radical, you know, the way that people, like, femmes present themselves. So I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like got lost in my brain.
No,
Can I say something?
No, please,
Yeah,
please.
I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think, it's a lot of these like behind the scenes moments that are often glazed over that you just, you see. I mean, there's a lot of inclusivity happening nowadays, but there still is such a need for more queer, more trans, more people of color, more femmes to the front. And, maybe we live in such a bubble sometimes that we have this like very clear, lens of the things that we prioritize and what we see. And it's a bit of an echo chamber always. But when you start to stray a bit away from that, you do still realize like how, taboo femininity is. And it's even moments like within my own career where like people have stepped in and say, like literally said in my ear that I need to practice more. I'm not good enough. Or simple like sexualization things, hitting on me while I'm playing, just like completely inappropriate, a space to be in where just, I don't think, men would have the audacity to do that to other men. And it's as simple as that. And we take that for granted. And so we've come a long way, but I still think there, is much more of a need for a push to, subvert these structures that are inherently patriarchal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I feel like sometimes femininity can feel like an invitation for people to, like you said, flirt or tell you what to do or criticize you in certain ways. That also kind of reminds me of your parties, Kitty Collective. I've never felt like so honestly free and free of judgment. Like the people that you bring to those crowds, like, are just all themselves in every way. The way they dress, the way they talk, the way they present themselves. It's felt like an act of resistance just being there. What's it been like for you, like starting it all?
Well, first, I mean, it's amazing that you feel that way at our parties. I think hardcore in general is just like a genre for resistance. It's always been this outsider fringe space when people can do what they want, express what they want. When I was doing stuff with Melting Point, we used to have the people from El Otro Lado come to those events, and they would say, they had really no experience with hardcore or gabber or noise, and they would come to those raves and say like, oh, this sounds the way our movement feels like. Yeah. This is like it's pain. It's these are these tortured sounds, and I'm glad that people have a place to come and express this and turn up and have a great time. So I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah, going off of that, we were wondering if there's a certain sound that you all tried to create that might be a reflection of your gender identity or sounds that you associate with, as like a reflection of kind of how you situate yourself in the landscape of gender and sexuality within the techno or nightlife dance music scene.
I think for me, it's been a journey, and I've sort of changed a lot over the past couple years. Sort of what you were talking about before of femininity being taboo. When I was first coming up, I wanted to be taken seriously. And in doing that, I felt when I was young that I like stifled myself a lot because, there's like the Jezebel trope is also something with like black women. There was like a time where it was even like thought of that black women can't be raped because of their like insatiable desire for sex. And that was a thing throughout the United States and everywhere. And so like when I first started DJing and being recognized, like I would dress down a lot. A lot of my sound was, looking back at it, catered to sort of like the cis male, like techno and what that particularly sounds like. And that's also like what influenced me because of just that's the dominant music. And, even translating that musically, I think, and this is like a generalization of it, but a lot of like male DJs in music, like I feel like where I feel it is in my feet, and I feel it with like stepping and then becoming more accustomed to sort of like tradition, stereotypically or generally like a more feminine woman sound. There's like more grooves to it, like particularly when I'm looking at women DJs, and I feel it in my hips. And I've been doing this transition, and when I started feeling that and understanding, like having a better grasp on what I like, translating the music and the techno that I want to hear to my hips instead of to my feet, or just playing with it more and understanding that there are these feminine and masculine structures in all music and what they may look like and sound like and come across. And with that musically also, I've gotten to the point of, because of this like Jezebel trope that I was very much afraid to embody, not necessarily, partly because of how I would be perceived, but also partly of how people would treat me in terms of like my own expertise, but also just treating me with like respect, like body respect, in spaces where like there's drug usage, adrenaline, lots, especially the techno I play. It's like very adrenaline based, more drugs, like more just like boom, boom, like excitement that I think sometimes like it's hard for people to like be aware of how they are in a space sometimes. And becoming more confident in my femininity a little bit more, like these are like the masculinity was like what I highlighted a lot when I was first coming up, and I love that, but also feeling more comfortable to like dress how I actually want to dress and not feeling sort of policed enough. And just sort of like playing with these transitions, I would say, has been sort of like my journey the past couple years.
I really liked how you talked about situating where the sounds live within your body. And like, I'm wondering about kind of like, does anyone else feel or how does your gender interact with your physical movement throughout a space? Or like how do sounds affect the way that you physically move in regard to being in the club?
So as like my long-standing background is in dance, I've been a dancer since 2, and that has heavily influenced my approach to like my sonic practice. And it's funny because even though I have such a visceral approach to music already, and I always have because of having a dance background, it is such a natural reaction. And to kind of piggyback off of what you said, I already think that it's such a funny and interesting concept that music can be so polarizing in a gendered way. People associate techno, I think, for the most part, with like harder and abrasive and aggressive, which is more like stereotypically testosterone based, and house can be a bit flamboyant because like historically it's been such a like connoted to like queer radicalism. And then, obviously there's such a range of sounds, but it is interesting too how, people don't also feel safe existing. And to me, music is so versatile, and the way that I feel influenced by movement is so important. And I think that's like that true sense of liberation when you can just hear sounds and rhythmically it takes you somewhere. And I don't want to be thinking about it being a polarizing aspect. I don't want to think that I'm listening to techno, so I have to adopt these sort of masculine traits. I feel like it's a sound, and it's so blissful, and it moves me in different ways. And I think that's the beauty of sound and of dance, and those sort of corresponding aspects just, are meant to sort of take you to a place where you can feel euphoric. So, I just think it's weird that it can be so like divisive.
Yeah, that literally sounds that have no clear shape can be gendered and structured and just like categorized. It's very weird to see the way people react to different things like that. And I guess I was also wondering in terms of how you guys battle the gaze, not even just the male gaze, just gaze in general, and how you find control, because it's everywhere. And I think one really powerful thing about femme DJs and nightlife workers is the day-to-day, minute-to-minute battle that you face with dealing with just the gaze, the being perceived. So what is that like for you guys?
I mean, I would be lying if they said that they didn't love me, because they do.
Yes, they do.
So it's a battle, but it's also like
I bet it feels good.
It feels good. It's an appreciation for sure. But I think lately I've been just really craving that there is a specific queer energy that I feel like is lacking in general. I mean, like obviously there's much more like abundance in safety and stability for gayness as opposed to, I don't know, being queer or being a lesbian, whatever. It's just like being a femme or an AFAB in these spaces or trans woman. It's really hard to exist sometimes because I feel like there is also such a, I mean, obviously not every gay person lives up to these standards, but I feel like there's definitely a specific trajectory and navigation that I've experienced with a lot of my gay male friends, and just the way that they navigate clubs and grinder culture. And there's a lot of just a lack of, I feel like, respect sometimes for your femme friends. Like either you can be treated like an accessory or just dismissed entirely if you're not an object of desire. And while I appreciate the energy and the love, sometimes on like a more intense level, it can be sort of isolating.
Sure. January, did you have something?
No,
I saw your eyes go.
I wasn't sure if you meant the gaze or like the male gaze.
Oh,
like,
that, I mean both, honestly. Who knows? Like, it kind of all comes together at the end in some ways. I guess just
Pride Month, so talk about it.
Both can be equally terrifying.
Yeah. You know, poppers are run. Oh, it's going crazy. And I guess, yeah, do you have anything, like, your experience with gays and also being behind the bar, like, too, and what's that like, dealing with customers and just people?
Well, with the gays, you know, at parties like Wrecked, it's a little intense sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the boys. They can be great. I love those events. As far as the gaze goes, I've just, like the gaze with your eyes, I have always kind of historically just shut that down. It has been, I don't know, it's sometimes terrifying for me. I try to keep that out of my space generally with Kitty Collective in general. I mean, you know, we want to provide a space where people can get up to whatever they want to get up to, but also it's not the main focus of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of talk about spaces, and I know some of you run your own parties, some of you have residencies. I was just wondering, what makes the space feel safe or unsafe to you? How do you cultivate that within your own work? What makes you feel kind of gender euphoria within a space or a gentle or welcoming atmosphere? Can anyone speak to that?
I will. For my intention with any party and how I look at nightlife is when it comes to a promoter, you're creating your idea of a utopia. So if you look at an event like Merge, it's an assumption, but that utopic situation is thematic and in a warehouse and like really builds that like big room community. My utopia, that flavor, the bound flavor, is a raw space. It's coded as somewhere that is specific to, it's the antithesis to the male gaze. So it's a space where sex workers can explore themselves freely without the gaze of some, like a potential client. And I feel like creating these spaces and like the safety of these environments, like I have created bounds specifically based off of like volatile language telling people not to come. And that makes the people who it's intended for feel safer. I genuinely believe that if you have a clear vision of what you're going for and of the utopia you want to create, the environment that you want to exist in, then there are thousands of other people who share that vision and they will come to you.
Yeah, I'm even thinking of like the fetish wear in general, and like because you were talking about how you would kind of take the abrasiveness within and like just rock with it, and just thinking about like even KYRUH, what you were saying, kind of toning your dress down, but then finding power back within it. It must be like a difficult thing to navigate. And how have you guys like managed the bumps in the road of finding like your footing and how to, I guess, express yourself outwardly?
I think it's interesting too because to me, like, I experience myself in the scene as two different people. It's like me, the clubber and the raver, and then me as the DJ. And they coexist really well, but I would say have different experiences. And some of the time, like I've experienced a lot of like gender euphoria as the raver that may not always come with me being a DJ. And so like when you're talking about sort of like these spaces, I would say for me, like, even though these spaces aren't perfect and we have a long way to go without these spaces, like this exploration of my sexuality and gender in a way where I generally feel more safe than I ever did before, is something that I'm really appreciative of because, similar to Sorel, I also came from like a dancing background from when I was really young, like contemporary and hip hop and ballet. And so when I was like 16, 17, 18 and going to like underage, like fake ID going around and clubbing, I wanted a club to go dance and I didn't really find the scene yet. And so I would go, you know, I came up from like a hip hop R&B background. So I would go to a lot of those like parties or clubs or top 40 music just simply because I wanted to dance. It wasn't necessarily the music I liked, but I wasn't aware at that time of like other spaces to do so. And I felt so preyed upon in ways that have not come close to the scene here. It's not perfect and I've experienced like bad things and, you know, like hardships and like the male gaze here, but it's like, it's not even comparable to other communities and other communities of music and dance, and just like enjoying yourself and having a good time. And that's ultimately like what attracted me to this scene and this music. And I just wanted to sort of like highlight that even if a space isn't perfect, I've collected so many moments and felt that this is like the one place I could be myself, or at the very least feel safe enough to explore it and get closer to it. I feel closer to who I am, like in this collective, in these communities.
So you're saying like all those moments kind of act like as a collective, like, I don't know, like jumping point to like kind of build yourself up on?
Yeah, definitely. I can even like mention like Katie's party Bounds. I would say was like very integral in exploring my gender and sensuality. It felt like a safe place to wear, be with, look at, like do things that are, as we've been talking about, like very taboo.
Yeah.
And like experiencing that party was like very integral. And it would also often be like really hard to like go back to the coffee shop in the morning and be looked at and like gazed there, you know, because like the type of way I was viewed and viewing and like perceiving things in this community was just so integral and impactful. And I think so many people don't get to experience it. The way that we get to. And again, it's not perfect. Like, that's not to say, like, we shouldn't be talking about, like, what more we need to do. And especially educating, like, more people who are coming from different, like, scenes and communities, like, now, because it's becoming a little more popular in New York City and around the world. So there's a lot of, like, education and awareness that needs to go around of, like, what these spaces actually are. But it still was and is like a very like beautiful, like captivating, like exhilarating way where I can like move my body and be who I want to be daily.
KYRUH, I've noticed you talking a lot about coming into yourself as a DJ, like coming into your sound, coming into your expression, and like your way of moving through spaces. I was wondering if anyone else wants to talk about their own personal process of like finding themselves within music making or like seeing music.
Well, I always approach things not necessarily from like a dance background. I came from more of an experimental, extreme music background, but actually one of the first ever nightclub experiences that I ever had would have been the first time that Bound was at Elsewhere in 2018, which was kind of life-changing for me. I came to it from like the BDSM perspective. I wasn't really there for the music. And then I discovered like, oh, there's a whole world, a whole community of people that are making this kind of similar sounds to what I was looking for in the background that I was coming from, but focused on dancing. And to be able to find a space where I could be myself and express that side of myself like comfortably was amazing. And then, like you said, it was kind of jarring to come back to the real world afterwards and feel so out of place among everyone again.
Definitely, or even try to explain like a night to somebody who wasn't there. It's like so difficult, and yeah, it just feels so good to be in those spaces. And what's your experience been like with going? Because you've been going to Bound for a bit. I feel like you're always there.
I love going to Bound. It's so fun. Yeah, I don't want to speak too much because I'm not a panelist, but I think it is a really freeing space. It feels very exploratory. There's a lot of like new things to look at and new ways to experience oneself in that party specifically. So yeah, I go back.
Does it feel like the safest place to you? And is that why you made it?
I am like really stringent with the use of safe space because I don't think a safe space exists outside of the room that you're in by yourself. Maybe I'm just like too traumatized to believe otherwise, but I think in order for a public event to list themselves as a safe space is really irresponsible. You would have to vet every single person that they're most intoxicated in order to create a safe space. Like if you're going to use a word like that. Safer spaces, like yes, this is what we're working on, right? So when I'm at Bound now, like I'm 100% working. Like I'm always like, just trying to patrol the environment. But I think hypothetically, like I feel very safe there, but like I'm also like extremely privileged in my position there. But I like don't, I'm not a dancer. I'm like someone who actually feels like has never felt a connection to the body. So I think music is the only way that's like music and kink are the only things that have like put me in a body. I'm also an Aquarius, but so for that reason, Bound is definitely a safe space for me because it has the two things that connect me to my body in one place.
Yeah, and how was making and producing music and DJing with that bridge between you and your body then?
It puts my mind, my ears, and my hands all in one place. So if that's happening, we're having a good day.
Yeah. And also thinking about like the feeling of control and the sense of gender, and how do you guys experience or like take control within that?
I feel like I'm my like neurodivergent brain always wants to be in control, but rarely are we. I think so many external factors like constantly, are influencing us as performers and creators, and rarely do I ever feel like everything is in my control. There's the sort of like headspace that I exist in that obviously always craves that level of control, that level of like being scrupulous, like perfection, and oftentimes I just have to accept that I have to let it be, and that permeates to sort of every corner of my life, and to relationships, to family, to my day-to-day. I think a lot of where I've, ended up was completely out of my control. And sort of it's trusting in the process that, you can be super proactive and instigate things and, put things into your own hands. But at the end of the day, there's so many factors influencing that level of control. And so I think it's this constant play that you have, right? It's this equilibrium. And sort of that goes back into resistance, this sort of push and pull where, there's a lot of things right now happening completely out of our control. And the best that we can do is show up and continue to push back.
Yeah. And I mean, day-to-day gender is like working on it every day. It's never going to be organized or come together. But you said equilibrium. Is there a time that you find that though?
I would say there's a certain level of harmony and balance that I feel. And it's kind of rare. It's almost like this weird ball of energy, if we're talking specifically about DJing, that it's like you feel like you're riding this wave. And you just get on the decks, you're super tapped in. It's like your set goes flawlessly. And I don't even mean in the technical sense. It's just like this really spiritual feeling that feels almost transcendental. And you walk away and you're just like, wow, did I do that? Yeah. Was that me? And yeah, I think in that sense, it's that moment where I feel like completely uninhibited, and I feel like, yeah, I feel really proud of that moment.
As you should, yeah.
How do you, going off of that, like the pride, the ball of energy, when you're interacting with a crowd, how do you kind of navigate the feeling of power or control over the people dancing, or like the energy that's coming back to you in relation to femininity or other points on your personal gender spectrum?
That shit feels so good. I think it feels really good, especially like this idea of control. Like, I have a lot of trouble with control. I came up in a home that was very high control and very tumultuous. So I would say my rebellion against that was the exact opposite, and like letting the pieces fall where they may, to the point that it was a good coping mechanism in sort of like life happens and we still keep going, but to a detriment in terms of like there are things that I can control in my life that I'm not, and just letting happen to me. And with a DJ set, or like, and it's, it's not too long, it's a few hours, and it's like at the most, generally speaking, and it's this time where, it's going to be ephemeral in the sense that everything is fleeting. Like, you're going to affect people maybe forever, but it's the details of this moment, it's not going to really last. And it won't ever happen the same way again. And just feeling that you have just this simple time where you can control something so spiritually important. We're not controlling like, it's very hard for me to control my finances or things like that, but it's like to control someone's energy and body and mind and sense of peace, or playing with like a sense of emotion. It's like a really powerful thing, and like a thing I think happens a lot because there are so many musicians in the scene, but it's powerful and potent and shouldn't be taken lightly, because it is like a type of manipulation that you're doing. And I think it's really wonderful that like we get to do it. And there was another place I was going with that, but that's that.
I think what's funny though is it can be so stupid at times. Like I think, I also used to be like, wow, I have to have like, the full control of this full set. Like, I really want everyone to be engaged and dance, and like that's my, the sort of goal for the set. But then sometimes like I don't even, if people are coming and going, like not every set is going to be full. But then there's moments like, I played Cha-Cha Slide in the studio, and like everyone was doing the Cha-Cha Slide on the dance floor, and it was like, if this is just like the only track that everyone's just like going off at, like that's all that matters.
So true. Are there other moments of just like silliness or fun that you all have experienced while DJing or like while being in the club environment?
Well, you talked a little bit about the gender, and we were talking a little bit like gender and stereotypes. Like, I also know, like, not every single time, but like what tracks are going to do to people in some ways. And it's like, there are like some tracks that I'm playing, like it's scaring the women. Like it's scaring them off the dance floor. And then like sometimes I'll play like a do, 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 do. And you see like, generally speaking, you'll see like sort of like the more masked people like not understanding what to do, and it like brings the girlies back, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think those are like really like fun moments to know like, okay, I'm intentionally going to do this right now. Like sometimes it's like the set is, sometimes I'm just sort of like riding a horse and like, we're going to see where this goes. But sometimes it's like, okay, like we need some of y'all to go and we need some of y'all to come back, which is really fun.
Yeah, the anxiety I get from playing like 10 seconds of jungle, like hardcore jungle in any dance floor in New York. People are like, it's just boom, and everyone's just like,
what do I do?
And I'm like, okay, blending, go to the floor, let's go.
Yeah, I think like one of the most exciting things about like being a DJ, like live, like not in a recorded mix situation, or a live recorded mix situation as there is like playing with the audience, like, respect to anyone who does plan their sets, but just like having a hard drive of thousands of songs and like understanding them and being able to like play two songs together because the names of the tracks speak to each other and you're the one that knows that. And like, just like all of these little like intricacies that like speak to the audience and like the energy exchange, like it should always be that fun.
Yeah, and even the way that plays into being a woman and like how we have to deadass manipulate people to get what we want and kind of play games under the scenes, like in terms of keeping ourselves safe. Like it's a survival tactic and kind of like the curation of yourself. And I remember KYRUH, we talked a lot about curation and the importance of that. And yeah, I've being like protective of the way you curate and project yourself. Let's see. I'm also thinking about, just more about like navigating a crowd. And how have you guys seen like things change recently in the scene with like interactions of maybe clubs becoming more popular, more men, more cis people coming in?
I mean, in general, I think in the last like 2 years, post-pandemic, like I just had moved to New York, so I can't really speak on like how the New York scene has particularly evolved because I don't think I've really been here long enough to watch that like longevity and the slow sort of changes. But obviously, like the rise of TikTok and Reels has like significantly impacted clubs, and obviously people's perception of what a club is and sort of the etiquette can really hit or miss on times, and that kind of goes back into like feeling safe. It's like, yeah, ideally, to create a safer space, there needs to be this like underlying acknowledgement of like what club etiquette is. And I'm dealing with people who come up and ask for requests or drunkenly come up to you and just like start talking and say, I don't know, there's like basis level things, and then there's more like severity. And I can't specifically talk on like the New York scene because I think since I've been here, it's been pretty consistent. But I would say even like Brooklyn to Manhattan has such a different energy. Yeah. I fucking hate playing in Manhattan because I'm like, oh man, it's a wild card every time. Like you don't know.
Is.
Yeah.
It's a wild card walking down the street.
Yeah. So in that sense, like definitely have seen different demographics of crowds and feel safer in the Brooklyn like underground scenes in general. But yeah.
Yeah, and KYRUH, I mean, you're from Brooklyn. How's that been to?
I think in terms of witnessing the changes, one of the good things, or at least, and this is only just sort of my perspective, I started sort of clubbing and raving in the scene maybe in like 2017 or 2018 or something like that. And to now, I would say like after the pandemic, and I don't know if other people would agree with this, and I'm not a long-standing person, but I've been I felt like before I didn't have a lot of Black peers dancing in the subset within the scene that I like enjoy in the music. And I've seen sort of that difference, which I really enjoy. Like I have more like Black peers, Black friends, Black fans, which I really enjoy. But in terms of sort of changing, which I would say is a little different and maybe not as great as it was like pre-pandemic, is sort of like the amount of people who maybe don't identify with our community just in general, and like all different identities who just are not a part of this community. And like it's not like the one person, it's the large sums, because like we all got our start in it sometime at some place. Yeah, I remember going to like Bound, and it was like I wasn't into kink yet, and I was still welcomed at the party and learned, but there wasn't like hundreds of people who weren't into like, you know, this thing at a time. So I think that's sort of like the difference. It's not like that new people are coming. It's sort of like the amount at a time, which I think can affect a space on a given night. And I think it just makes us as like clubbers and DJs, we have to get a little bit better, like at finding what nights to go out, who to see. I know like that's changed a lot for me. Like there'll be artists who I really want to see, but if I know like the vibe of that party, I probably won't go. Might make the concession and like stand off into the corner and like go and just like vibe out. But so yeah, I think there's just like more navigating and more I just have to think a little bit more delicately about like what it'll look like if I do or go out or be in a specific space and time.
I think that, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say in this economy too, I think we all have to be a bit more aware, just because no one can afford paying for covers, drinks, whatever sort of indulgences is just it's not realistic. And I think that is also one thing that I have noticed, at least in the last like 6 months, is just like some places are kind of dead and dying. And I mean, there's festivals and clubs closing globally, and it's sad. There's just not, there's a recession, and we can't support everything.
I'll be the elderly voice, the geriatric voice on the panel. So in like the early 2000s, and I'm sure before that, I wasn't going out before that, you found out about parties from like going to clubs and getting flyers, or going to record stores, and like there'd be like a rack and it'd be all party flyers. So like if you wanted to, you could really have access to like the most underground party just from like walking into a store. And I think what's cool about the way things are now is like we are probably the most socially conscious community that has a wide reach that, this is inflammatory, but like that has ever existed up until this point. We have such an amazing access to information. So if someone's entry point is buying a ticket to a big club, then they have this introductory point, and who knows where they come from before that. But then you can like kind of, it's like a video game. You like work yourself through these levels, and then you get to like a party with a door policy. And if you've like learned a certain amount of etiquette to like get through that point, like we as a community, fortunately for society, unfortunately for us, sometimes have a social responsibility to like keep educating people. And like we do have this like amazing power that like trickles into the mainstream to like really help society like develop ideas. And so, if you get into a door policy party, then like you develop community, and you can find yourself like really in the underground and like really developing more progressive ideas. So I think, when you do go to a ticketed event, when you're so ingrained in underground culture, it can feel really hard, and it can feel, you could feel alienated and polarizing. But, just knowing that you're an integral part of a community that's shaping the way that other people will think, we're in a good place, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to ask more about the etiquette. It's something like the behavior of people, I think, since the pandemic has changed a lot in like music spaces broadly. I think I know, like when I was a teenager, I was part of kind of like punk music spaces, and I noticed a huge difference in the way people conducted themselves in those spaces after the pandemic, like when everyone came out and started partying again. And I was just wondering what would you say people should know, like when people are entering the spaces for the first time, or what are some qualms that you have with the way that people are new to spaces or like unfamiliar with them conduct themselves? Like, what would you want to tell someone about like how to act or how to interact?
That's a hard question.
Tough question.
Yeah, think on it.
Well, I think there are some things that maybe like all of us can think of, like in terms of maybe photographs or awareness of the space around you and how you talk to people. I think like your question brings up for me like what I think as people who are part of this community that we can do, that I think it's not that it's every single person's burden. We're going out to have like a good time, and that's that. I think I've found more success with those people who are kind of on the peripheral, like their new entry point could be kind of cool, don't know all of how things work and all of the etiquette. Expressing a little grace to those people can do a world of difference for the impact of like how our scene is years to come. And that's not to say like be nice to like the asshole who's like, I don't know, like touching up from behind on people, that's not to say that. But I think those people, and it's hard to like clock who those are, but those people who they're getting it, but they're not quite yet, you have like I feel like I have the power to educate them. And so they feel like when they come back the next time, they've learned more skills about how to act inside of the space. And I think those people, like when I was growing up, giving me grace, like was very awesome in like terms of like all of the things I learn now. Like even something like very simply like happened. I remember when it all happens sometimes, we misgender people. And I remember like doing that when I was like much younger, or like a particular incident where I felt like really bad. And, now, and I think a lot of people, we know how to engage in situations like that and what to do. And I won't like really lay it out. Like you can like imagine like what you might do. And I had like a friend that I brought to see me play recently who has like never been to a rave, but is like a little weird, a little awkward. And they misgendered someone and they really didn't know what to do. And I like took them and someone they were like hooking up with, and I took them and they felt really awful. And I took them aside and just sort of been like, it's okay. I mean, like you really could have offended the person, but you also don't want to make this situation about you because it's not about you and what you did. So you don't want to like make them feel like they have to accept the fact that you did this, And I think like this was a person that I could see over time, like this being a really like great space for their own gender and sexuality that they're dealing with. And so I think like those like on the cusper people, it's like giving the like guiding them if you want to, because it's not our fucking job to do that all the time. If you want to, or you have the capacity at a moment at a time, like I think that's just like really helpful over time.
Yeah, I would say in general, I agree with that. Like, it's not so much about like telling people at all what to do. It's I would never want to like police anyone, especially like in their first experiences. Like I think unless it was undeniable problematic behavior. But it is really important. And I think so much of like in my own experience, what I pride myself off of is like trying to be as adaptable as I possibly can, because I feel like I'm the most grounded I've ever felt in my life, and now I do have the capacity to, not be as reactive, to not be as defensive. And, not everyone owes people who are making them uncomfortable that space. But at this point in my life, like I do have the capacity to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't get it. Mm-hmm. And I think, that grace makes all the difference, because then somebody going home and being like, oh, I had no idea this version of transness existed, because they have one idea of what a rave could be like. It's sort of, those points of forgiveness and grace and mercy that you can hold in spaces or for people that, otherwise like can result in like a backlash. And I don't even think it's just changing the scene. It's definitely impacting society and the way that we as a humanity view certain types of people and spaces in general.
Does it ever feel like a burden though?
Yes.
I think this is like our responsibility as like people who are working is like assuming that burden, because at any point you can just say, I want the responsibility of a party goer. But as a promoter or an artist, like who is, looked up to as a leader in some way, or like someone who's more or less in charge for the evening, if you're taking home any financial gain from the experience you have, you're being compensated for your level head and your responsibility in the moment.
Yeah, that makes me think of like the party making and organizing, and like in what ways does that become what's the difference between it being educational and also a safe place, and like how do you navigate like that very tough limbo there?
I mean, like the first things first, like you can intellectualize nightlife, you can create theories, we can like discuss like issues and annoyances, but like the number one thing that like sometimes I have to like give myself a pep talk, but like this is all about having fun. It's all about like euphoria and glory and escaping the coffee shop moment. So for me, that's like the most important thing, is to like prioritize like what a good time looks like in any situation. And then I can like rack my brain about safety and, those are the things that like are the walls that are built around the base level, which is fun.
Yeah. And I mean, it's nuanced, right? I wouldn't say that there's like a time that I'm like actually educating somebody. I'm not having this like literal verbal discussion. And I mean, maybe in some instances it will happen or happen online, whatever the case is. But I think it is important, like as Katie just said, as a responsible like person that's active in the community, or now somebody who has a following that is like looked up to in some regard. I think, the best thing that you can just be is kind, honestly. Like I think that's super important, because there is always going to be entitlement. There's always going to be ego. And I think in such an ego-driven industry, it's really important to just, give people grace, show them generosity. Even just something as little as like walking off the dance floor and like giving somebody a hug. And even if you're super, super drained, I mean, this is like both an emotionally and physically exhausting career. I mean, you're playing late nights for long sets and you get off and then everyone wants your attention or wristband, whatever the case is. And I just think that if I'm not capable, I at least communicate that. And I think drawing boundaries for yourself and for others, but while still, maintaining that level of generosity is really important, and it does go a long way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Junior, how has Kitty Collective been like a merciful space?
I mean, I think that the people who show up to our events, specifically when they walk in the door, they see exactly what kind of event. They know whether or not they're the kind of person for that space. I think we've curated something really nice, so we don't have a lot of difficulty keeping like anybody out who shouldn't be there. But generally, I feel like a lot of people, especially in the club scene, over like like illegal warehouse raves, kind of forget that it's supposed to be about the music, and a lot of people get too concerned about looking really cool in a space, or just kind of like whether or not they're going to match the vibe. And my advice to them is just always, I don't get to party a whole lot. I feel like I work every event. And when I do, I'm there in, like my gym shorts and a crop top, and I'm there to, like sweat. And I feel like that's the ethos that people should be bringing to the space, is like, I'm here to hit the dance floor and lose myself and not have a big ego about this.
One time I almost got turned away from basement because I was wearing gym shorts and a crop top. I was like, I'm not here to stunt, I'm here to dance. Let me in.
Exactly.
Is there anything like any ego you think that has made its way into the club scene in New York that you think maybe should be looked at again, or like stuff like that? What's your kind of litmus test about that stuff?
I mean, I would say it's ubiquitous. Like, there's not one city or scene that I haven't seen ego exist in. I mean, there is so much community respect and love. But I think especially after the pandemic, there's like scarcity mindset, and that's still something that I see, unfortunately permeating. Like I even in the scene, like I don't always feel uplifted. I actually feel torn down, and, sometimes it can be an individual, sometimes it can be a group. And that's sad. Like I would love to, just be happy and for people getting certain gigs. I don't, there is sure sometimes like, unfortunately not enough work, but I think, instead of celebrating like people's losses, I think in general we would often be much better if we're just celebrating each other's achievements. And, in time, like things also balance out. If like it's not your moment now, like it will come. Or maybe you've had a steady career of 20 years. Like let the new generation come. Let more people, have a chance at artistry. And I think that's also something where people, I've seen certain comments around like certain DJs getting booked for sets that they don't normally play, or why is this person offered this opportunity when I'm a better representation of that. And of course, if it's something that's like a very clear, problem with like something that pertains to, gender or race or class, like generally would love to uplift more marginalized people. But I think sometimes there's just a very sour, egoistic attitude, and that, I think that needs to be talked about more. And, with the sort of prioritization of people that have a following, for example, when getting booked, I think there's a lot of talent that's just simply overlooked. And, you can go viral on TikTok and then be playing a festival next year when there's people who have worked on the craft for their entire life. And that, to me, I don't know, that's also not even necessarily just in the hands of the community. It's like a structural issue and an overall capitalistic consumerist problem.
Yeah, speaking of the capitalist side of it, do you guys feel commodified in your identity? Ever, like, if you're getting booked for gigs or fetishized in certain ways?
I mean, I feel like definitely I have felt like people have stuck me on lineups specifically because I'm trans and they want to have that kind of representation on their lineup to make it like more of a generalized queer event as opposed to just specifically all cis gays or something. And I mean, at this point for me, I feel like I've had the luxury recently to be able to tell people that I don't want to play stuff if it doesn't really fit my vibe, and I would like to be able to say no more often. But sometimes fiscally it's the right thing to do. Yeah.
I was also going to ask earlier, when you were talking about being behind the bar, do you have any like crazy or ridiculous memories or stories that you could share? Or is it all a blur?
Way too many.
Yeah, okay. We'll leave it at that. Do you guys have any like just strange encounters with people coming up to you or crossing boundaries anything recent?
Oh man, I mean, nothing too. I wish I have like so many anecdotes, but I feel like they're all somehow outside of dating. I'm just like my walk down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, just like poor behavior, sort of just like people, like that one instance. I actually, this was the craziest audacity because I'm half Mexican and my dad's from Guanajuato, and I actually threw the first queer party, I mean, that we know of. In that city, it's like famously Catholic. So it's pretty conservative in general. So I, in like collab with my dad, found a space, found bartender, and this guy really wanted to lend his equipment. My dad has a mixer, but he was like insistent on giving us his like CDJs. And I was like, well, of course, if we can like up the sound, like why not? But his sort of trade-off, was that he would get to play. And I was like, this is a queer party. And like, he was just a straight man. But in the end, I was like, okay, whatever. Like we all have equal set times. It's fine. And about 30 minutes into my set, he was like, come on, like, can I play already? And I was like, it's been 30 minutes. Like he already, insisted on shutting the like short time set times down just in case the police would show, and he was playing at the end. So he didn't, of course he didn't want to not play. Like this was the tech house night of his dreams where he invited all of his bro-y friends to come. And, I was like, no, I'm going to play the hour and a half that we agreed on. He comes back about 20 minutes later and then, just puts his USB in and starts digging for tracks. And I was like, I still need to use that CDJ. Like, and then that's the instance I was talking about, where he was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get to play. And like, this is all while I'm playing. And there's like, there's not really a barrier for the stage. So it's like to have an argument like in front of people who are just like dancing and trying to feel liberated as queers for the first time. Also, like in that city, which is so small, I felt like it meant a lot to some of those people there, and it was just embarrassing overall. And in the end, I was just like, look, like I would really like to finish this, and he just leans in and goes, I think you need to practice more.
Oh, that's
I didn't like that, triggered the deepest part of like shame in me, and I just unplugged and like remember running and being like, I didn't genuinely think that, but it was just one of those moments where it's just like, wow, the pure audacity of some people. And that's, over the years I've really learned to just like stand on business and be like, no, you can actually just fuck off and like take your CDJs if you want. We have a mixer. Whatever the case is, but just don't let people bully you into anything. And it's really hard, but
that seems like a
territory.
Yeah, it seems like a moment of that push and pull, like when to give mercy and when to like stand your ground, and how to decide when that is the case. I guess if just like a fucking asshole, then stand your fucking ground.
Yeah, and then the worst part of it all is that the cops never came. He played a tech house set for 8 hours into the early mornings.
Come on.
Yeah, I so after that I immediately left. Like, you know what, I don't even want to be here anymore. And next day I talked to the bartender and he was like, oh yeah, babe, it went until 10 a.m. Booming tech house for 8 hours.
It's ridiculous.
The audacity.
I'm really sorry that happened to you. And it also, I'm so sorry. That's fucking awful. But it just was making me think about how important like standing up for ourselves is, and you learn that over time, but also how important like allyship is in like instances like that. There have been like lots of instances like where I'm DJing or like raving or clubbing where it's like, yeah, I can stand up for myself, but also like if I have like a male's voice like standing up for me, or even like a white woman's voice, like when it comes from them, like sometimes it has a stronger effect, and it takes like a lot of pressure off of me to deal with it. I've been sort of like grateful for a lot of like the allyship I've had where they are assuming their space of like almost like protecting me because of where like who I am and where I come from. Like it's for lack of a better term, like it's really important for me to like enjoy my time out, maybe compared for like a white woman who's like raving or something. Like I've had that happen a lot of times where it's like they've taken on the burden for me, which I've like really appreciated it. And yeah, I think like that's also like really important in this like conversation of like gender and sexuality. Like if you come from populations of like more dominant majority, like mainstream, whatever it's called, like taking up for your friends and your peers and your DJs, like I think you'll never know like how helpful and like how helpful that is for us to like have a good sleep at night, you know?
I think I think things have gotten like a little heavy thinking about all the shitty people and shitty things that happen. I want to switch it up to be a little bit more positive. KYRUH, do you have a specific party or moment where you felt like the most euphoric and like you had your like people right there and you didn't need to be protected?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I just cried on the dance floor for the first time like 2 weeks ago, just of sheer joy. Actually, yeah, Kartik knows. This time when I went to Movement for the first time recently, and to experience like Detroit techno, like there are things you read about it, you could see it here, but to witness it like at its source, with people who have like come from Detroit, who are beacons, old and new, and to experience like these sets. I mean, I've had like moments crying at a club because of like joy about maybe the space or the community or feeling seen. But I actually had a moment like really recently. I just like cried because the music was so good. I didn't there was no other release from my body other than like on the dance floor just to like start crying. And yeah, like at Movement, I would just say like a lot of we're talking about the ego like that's here. In New York City, like outside of our scene, inside of our scene, like the nicest person in New York like has an ego. Like it's just part of like New York City, I would say, and probably a lot of big cities and a lot of places. But like it is like a huge thing being like growing up in New York. Like I got a big ass ego, even if you're like really nice, but and humble and kind. But like it was like all of it was like shed. Like I think people were in their like rawest forms. And that was like a really beautiful, like impactful time. Like 2 weekends ago, I'm still not over it.
Maybe can everyone share a time when they were at their rawest form or like their most joyful in the club, or maybe even a time where you felt really supported by the people around you? If you can think of one.
I think for me, it would have been, I mean, I feel like I've still been chasing the high from this moment. Probably 2018, I saw it was Butt Techno, Eris Drew, Josie Rebel back to back, and it that was a moment for me where I cried on the dance floor, especially during Josie Rebel's set. Was unbelievable. I think that was the moment where I understood that I'm not just dancing with my feet, but hips and everything else, and that was a real watershed moment for me. You know, there was some substances involved that definitely got me to that place, but I feel like it's just all kind of been downhill from there. Well, not downhill, but it's all been a roller coaster since then.
Yeah, I would say that there's something so special about, you know, getting to witness some of your favorite artists live for the first time. That's just like like otherworldly. Yeah, for me, I think that was seeing Floor Plan, and also DJ Stingray for the first time. Like those, I mean, yeah, Detroit also. I've always kind of had such a weird disconnection from my roots. I feel like I've had heavy imposter syndrome my entire life, because on the one hand I feel very disconnected from my Mexican heritage. On the other hand, I don't feel like connected at all to my, you know, American upbringing, even though that was in Detroit, because I lived with a family that was so sheltering. And so I didn't really get to experience culture at all from any side of my family. And, lacking that really, created this ambition in me and this drive as I got older to seek that out for myself. And so when you get to, experience this like real palpable thing in front of you, that, there is no barrier and wall, and it's sort of like a confrontation with yourself as well. And so in that regard, like getting to see, legends of Detroit when I felt so removed from there was such a special euphoric sensation and experience.
That was beautiful. I think I'm like a self-subscribed experientialist. Like I just love like seeing environments and like seeing how people create them. So for me, it's always when I like go to a smaller market and see people be able to have like these euphoric experiences where they don't have everything that we have in New York. So notably, I was invited to play in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Chattanooga has like Atlanta a few hours away and Nashville a few more hours away, but there's really just like nothing else around there. So the party there was some goths, there were like plenty of queer people, there was like someone in a panda costume spinning glowing orbs. And everyone was just so happy to like be at a rave, like to be in a space that was intentional, that wasn't like hyper curated for like a certain kind of queer person or a certain genre. It was just like actually a safe space for these people who are unsafe in their day-to-day lives in Tennessee and like the surrounding rural areas. So that was just like one of the coolest experiences, like probably of my whole life. And like I played Philly Pride on Sunday, and Philly has a lot of different experiences, but I'm from Philly, and it was just like so beautiful to like see like again like not exactly like the most like niche of the niche community like experience like Pride Bliss together, but like all different kinds of queer people like have like their moment of like euphoria.
If someone being from the South too, I relate to that, and just how good it feels to come to a place where it just feels so saturated.
Yeah, I think you also just touched upon something that's like really nice to think about and acknowledge too, because being like very blessed and privileged to exist in this bubble, we often kind of take for granted the sort of like lives that we do lead. Like by no means are, like, at least speaking for myself, like is my life like quote unquote normal. Like I am a queer sex worker who is a freelancer, and living day to day, like I get to define my life, and I've worked really hard on myself to, get to the point where I've realized what I do want, and this certain level of like self-awareness in terms of identity and music and artistry and that whole intersection. But there's something so special about like attending these spaces where like, maybe this like panda suit person is like working a corporate 9-to-5 job, but then like gets to have this level of escapism. And like people who like lead a like relatively like corporate life, also deserve that sort of liberation. And I think, music is always the place that gives people that opportunity.
So thinking about like escapism, free of shame, joy, collectivism, I want to end on a last question of what does the future for femmes, non-binary DJs, nightlife workers, producers, promoters, what does that look like for you guys? Okay, well, since we went from that side, I'm gonna have to put you on the spot, Katie. Do you mind starting? What, for you personally, what does your future look like?
I'm just going with the flow. Like I've been around for a really long time. I started raving when I was 14, I'm 35. Like, that's over 20 years. Like, I never, like, wanted to be that person, like, I've been doing that. But, like, man, I'm so tired.
The geriatrics kicking in.
Yeah, I am. But, like, it's like, just, you keep me young. It's, really exciting to see, like, the cultural shift. Like, when I started DJing, it was, like, an extreme volatile environment. Like, that I'm a white woman, and, like, I was treated like absolute, like, worse than dog shit by these dudes. And, like, to, like, and, like, I was always, like, in queer circles, but to see, like, the culture move in, like, such a positive direction, and, like, the world is, like, such absolute shit. Like, I'm a nihilist, I'm a goth, I have so much angst, but, like, also with that, I, like, really believe that the world is only as good as we make it, and, like, everyone is, like, doing their best and is doing such a fucking good job, and it, like, that's, like, what really keeps me going and, like, keeps me, like, in the scene, instead of, like, sometimes, you just, like, want to disappear, and, like, I'm a homebody, but, like, it's, like, cool to be here. Like, who makes a print magazine anymore? Everyone's going out of business. This is so awesome.
Thank you. That was the point, yeah.
Yeah,
I realized no one was doing it. And like what you're saying with the flyers, and that's how people would find shit. That's exactly why I wanted to bring it back.
Yeah. So, like, everything, like, there's, like, international, like, beyond crisis. I don't even know how to verbalize, like, the pain, but, like, in this room, like, in this moment, like, everyone here, I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Katie. That means a lot.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that sentiment. I think as we see in the last decade, even, it really just teaches you that, life is truly precious, and that things are completely indeterminate and out of our control. It's hard to envision exactly, like, what a future will take shape as, but I am, very, proud to see, everyone as a society, standing by, like, very strong morals, and, of course, there's always going to be, the counter resistance, but at the same time, like, I think we're all doing a really, really good job, and, despite the sort of adversities that life continues to throw at us, honestly, I just want to continue to see more love and more action. But yeah, and hopefully some, I don't know, good meals in the future.
Definitely.
I think it's really hopeful. I think the future is looking, definitely looking up. I'm seeing, with the hardcore scene, I feel like that was the stuff that I was really into. When I was first getting into things, I don't spin that anymore. I spin a lot more techno, but seeing a younger generation come into that, being exposed to that kind of music, really embracing it, coming at it with, like, such positivity. And then just, like, I don't know, they're almost self-policing. They're like, oh, this is our space. This is for us. And then just, like, having that, and then, like, I don't know, it's been beautiful to see. It's been great. And I'm looking forward to everything that comes with that. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo the sentiment of everybody. I think for me, like, I've been clubbing now for, like, 9 years, and so, like, I'm kind of, like, growing up with this. Like, this is, like, a huge part of me growing up, and I'm kind of, like, at this, like, stage of feeling, like, very, like, protective and, like, mentory to a lot of, like, not male, like, persons in the scene. And I mean, for me, like, maybe I've gotten a lot of, like, gig opportunities from men, but I would say, like, all of, like, my biggest, like, support and guidance and, like, feeling valued and feeling and, like, understanding more about myself and more about this as, like, a business, like, that's all come from, like, mentors and, like, people who love me who, like, aren't men. And I mean, men are fine too, but I'm seeing myself in this position now, like, of like offering what I have learned and grown in like to other people now. Like that's in terms of like support. That's in terms of like even resources. Like I remember like doing a gig and not having a place to sleep and then like crashing in like a really unsafe place and not really knowing what's going to happen. And like now I'm at the point where I can like offer like a young DJ like a bed, you know, or like a place to crash. And like I kind of like feel like as I'm growing up, like those are the things that I'm really excited about, like just like being like an older woman like in this space and like excited to do that for others and to meet more people and just like that like collective consciousness and like education and like love being like passed down because like yeah, like there's like a memory of it and it's, you know, like it's being documented, like there's a history that's like being passed down and I'm really just like excited for like what that's going to look like.
Mm-hmm. So beautiful. I'm hearing mentorship, breaking generational trauma. I'm hearing hope and excitement. I'm hearing good meals for one, but also exploration.
I mean, everyone just deserves a good meal.
Oh yeah, of course. And then exploration and collectivism, and I'm also hearing just having a good time that we're all doing our best. And I think that's a really good note to end things on. Thank you.
So now I think we'll open it up for a few questions if anyone in the audience has them.
Yeah, please. Anything, any comments, whatever.
Jonah?
I was really interested to hear, I don't remember who, but somebody was bringing up the topic of like how being a DJ has a different interaction with your body than dancing. And like, I wonder if you could speak a little bit. Yeah, I hear you. And I wonder if like if any of y'all have some thoughts on this about like, because I also make music and I feel like I relate to music very differently when I'm like sitting down making music or standing up very differently from like dancing in the crowd. And like if you could speak a little bit to how that, yeah, like how you relate to your body when you're not, like when you're DJing specifically, when you're standing and not dancing, and like how that.
I have to repeat the question for the recording, but the question is about how making music and dancing to music differs in terms of the experience that you have within your body.
I guess I'll like start with this and I hope y'all contribute because I like don't know if I can really like describe it. It's like such a ethereal action for me. I just translating like music like from knowing what it sounds like or like listening to it in the moment and like just like hoping that it interacts with the vibe of the night and the crowd. Like, I don't know what that process is, but like, it's certainly like flowing through my body, like to make it happen. And like, I dance behind the booth. I'm not like, sometimes I'm still, I guess, but, I just feel like it's more of like, that's when music becomes a language and I process it like I process language, like something that I just know and don't have to think about. So yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, I would say, like because I specifically talked about dancing on the dance floor, I would say that when I'm producing music, and in general, I think what I've noticed over time is that like I don't necessarily communicate in the way that like my previous partners have communicated or like have the ability to communicate or certain friends. It's really hard for me to like give feedback or like look at something or taste something and know what I'm feeling. It's really hard to place that emotion or sensation for me. Like I have, you know, I can't like listen to a track and then be like, well, this is what I know, what I like about it and what I dislike. And, you know, same thing even with a set. Like I really need to like marinate in that for a bit and then think and then process and then discuss. And I think that is sort of the way that, you know, like non-body movement translates into music production, is that it is an inherently visceral experience. And it is sort of like the way that you can envision rhythm and movement sort of being like a play with your hands and your mind. And I think that sort of cross-pollination of body movement, but like for your brain, is so easily channeled into music sonically. And I think that that's, for me, what I love about creating music, is because like the way that I envision moving to the music is how I can produce something that's like very textural. And I think, I can't imagine if the music is like boom, bada, ba, bada, boom, like I can translate that into a music sound language. So if I want to go boom, bada, ba, ba, boom, 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 bada, ba, like, I don't know. And maybe that's because I have a dance background. So that sort of like, has heavily informed that like non-verbal vocabulary. But it is something that I think, you can actively practice. And once you start to experiment with kind of sounds that you like, then you can start envisioning the rhythm and how you can replicate that without necessarily having that like natural dance vocabulary.
Everyone here, I think, spoke to an element of like having control, wanting to be in control. I feel like I have always approached the dance floor with this idea of losing control, not being in control, and making music. Playing music is like you're starting the wave and then riding it. You're in control, but then in the context of that space, you sort of are. I mean, you are bouncing it off of something that's out of your control. But it definitely, I would say that I've approached the creation of music as trying to create my own momentum, which I find really difficult.
Did that answer the question?
I think definitely did.
I like that thing about trying to lose control. I think that's the way that I approach getting on the dance floor too. And when I'm really getting crazy, that's how you know it's good. Nona? Okay, so the question was, what is something you wish you heard more of with the philosophies of other DJs, their approach, what they're doing?
In general, I feel like I would love to hear like more risk taking. I actually was just having a conversation with my friends because they, we both identify as multidisciplinary artists, but they were just talking about how they're really scared to like, take the approach to move into different soundscapes. And I think that's really interesting because for me, I kind of pride myself on being a really versatile DJ and having that sort of range. And they're like, I don't really understand how to move past this sort of hard techno because I channel a lot of my like anger and anxiety into those sets. And they essentially want to get to a place where they feel like they can like start exploring new soundscapes, but they don't know how. And I mean, the only way that I can say is like, you really just have to go for it and take that risk. And I think that should be just more embedded in the sort of overall philosophy, is that don't be afraid to mess up. Don't be afraid to take a new turn. Like in general, I mean, music is ageless. Like we can have careers in music for the rest of our lives. And I can't imagine that anyone is going to stick to doing the same thing for their entire life. Like there's going to be a point where you want to, maybe start producing more, maybe start doing collaborations, start doing live sets, start doing XYZ genres. And yeah, I think it's like never a better time than now to take those risks. And yeah, I would just say like start that exploration whenever you feel comfortable. And there's a lot of ways to go about it. And I think that there could be more of discussion in the community about, where to start, how to start playing vinyl if you're a digital DJ only. Yeah, I think there could just be more discussions in general. Like I appreciate this panel discussion because it opens up so much. And I think we could all be talking about, a multitude of things that need to be sort of like looked into the community. And yeah, that's definitely one of them, is sort of like, how do we expand as artists? How do we, create this space for interdisciplinary art? How do we collaborate with each other, even if sonically we don't even make sense? Like, there can be such a beautiful blend of two different artists and create something new and innovative. And, that's what I'm kind of aspiring to do in the next couple of years.
I think going off of what you were saying, something that most other like art forms like really emphasize is the why of the artist. Like, why do you paint? Why did you do this performance? And I think like I'm just really interested in more DJs' why. Even outside of like our community, like I'd love to hear a Vegas DJ's why.
Anyone else?
I could just piggyback off really quick what you said about the collaboration. I think it's really easy compared to like other music disciplines it's really easy for a DJ to not collaborate. It's like it's more of a singular thing. Like, you have like bands or, like other art forms, like there's a lot of collaboration like inherent in it that you could kind of get away with not doing it. Like if you are a DJ and a producer, like it can be just like a very singular experience. And I think the collaboration with other artists, I think every time I've like played with another DJ, like I learned, like my skills infinitely went up, because I got to see and you also feel like comfortable to bounce ideas off of different artists when it's not necessarily just like the live performance time. So I think that is like something that I would say, I think I wish I heard more of like coming up, because like I think coming up we hear a lot of like branding, finding your own sound, or what like the scene and the community. But I think I would like to hear more of like the musical collaboration, specifically the musical collaboration piece, because I think it's just like it makes your own performance like so much more robust and informed by what's happening around you with other artists. And then I think it also like really helps like with the whole like ego and competition thing that we like often feel, because like if people are so separate from you, DJs are so separate from you, and you're only like kind of going out to see other things happening and you're not collaborating, that sense of feeling like I have to get X over Y, like that I think dissipates a little bit more when you just like hang out and work musically with other artists.
And for those of you who don't know, KYRUH is one half of Madness of, the other being Anthony. And he was here yesterday and was on the panel for DJs Against Apartheid. And it's been...
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out Madness of. And yeah, it's been really beautiful to hear you guys talk about your collaboration, because you guys have been friends for like, over a decade, I think?
Yeah, I guess longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think he was like really integral. Oh, he was like really integral in this idea of like go DJ with other people.
Yeah.
Like just go like make some art with other people. I think it's just like friendships with other artists don't like necessarily just have to like live at the club. They could the art can live outside of it too.
Beautiful.
Cool. So I'm hearing collaboration, risk taking, the why. January, you want to speak to it or no?
No. I agree with that last part. I think this is definitely the summer of like spinning on the decks at your friend's house.
Yes.
Totally.
Hot collab summer.
For real.
I think this question is interesting because what I was thinking a lot about preparing for this is I think everyone wants to hear all of your music, but just giving you all a chance to speak about the why, or a chance to kind of like get interested in each other's reasoning or each other's practice or approach. It's been really cool. So thank you all.
Yeah, if there aren't any more questions.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so something before she played a set recently at Nowadays, Amani, aka Dirty Cosmeti, said something that I've been thinking about a lot, which was that it was like a post on her Instagram story where she said, like, when I play tonight, don't show up to escape. And that was something I was thinking referring to the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and the idea that what she was posting was that essentially like see this as an opportunity to engage with your community and to like turn the space and to show up in this way that will enable you to continue to struggle and to continue to act. And I was just wondering how all of you see your role in that, and if you have a specific way that you want to have your audiences show up through your sets and show up through your community.
Cool. This is going to be a wonderful closing out question, because it really gets back at our first question about identity as resistance. So the question was kind of about how to not use DJing as an escape or being in the club as an escape, but rather to let it further galvanize your ability to kind of like interact with your community and like maintain a sense of like commitment to a practice of resistance, which is what brought us all here to begin with. Specifically in regards to the ongoing genocide in Palestine and other struggles that communities find themselves facing currently in our world.
I think something that is really important to me is like remaining grounded in these spaces. If that is like the action, I mean, I'm coming from a unique perspective where I don't participate in party favors. So I'm generally, if not for a few drinks, pretty sober at an event. So, and I don't socialize very much. So these are the spaces where I have the most meaningful interaction off of the internet. So if you're in the right headspace for these conversations, I think that's important in the world we're living in. I would like to think other people are taking this opportunity to build community in that way, but I also like can't pass judgment on if someone wants to get high. But I do think that like taking this time to be mindful about your mindset is valuable.
Yeah, and I also, like, speaking to that, I think just, like, being an artist, something I've been thinking about recently with everything that's going on, it's, like, sometimes, like, when we think about sort of emotionality, especially in the club, you know, we're thinking about, like, joy, and we're thinking about adrenaline and connectedness, and, you know, some of these, like, emotions that are associated more with, like, positive emotions. But, like, most of what, like, people are sort of, like, feeling in the world, or most of the emotions that you'll have in life, like, involve some sort of, like, fear, intimidation, or worry, or sadness, or anger, or, you know, and I can think of a lot more negative types of emotions, like, oftentimes, but maybe that's also the nihilism in me. And it's like, what I love about these spaces is that being moved by things that aren't just pleasant, but being moved by things that are also like hard to hear. And of course that take that for moment to moment, what that looks like in the club. But, you know, I've had like conversations like in the club with like someone who was like once an Orthodox Jew, or someone who's like lost a friend that day and like came out, or someone who is like actively like working in action for like Palestine. And not to gloss over those things when they come up like in a club setting, I think it's just like really important, because it's a time for people to sort of shed some of that, but it's also a place where people feel comfortable enough to shed it and understand that like people might be using this as an escape, but understand that like this escapism from it is to be present in something else, and like all of those things like coincide. And I think it's just like really important when you are DJing or you are just like out as a clubber, like to understand like that's what's going on. Like you don't necessarily always have to be like a positive light or engage with just like the positivity, if you have the capacity, if it works, if it makes your friend like feel seen, like that's a beautiful place to like engage with it in like a way that I think we can heal from it a little better than if we were like talking about it at like a coffee shop or it came up at a coffee shop, like because we feel like a lot of us feel more of like our truer selves there. So I think that's just always like really important when you're going out. I too like kind of take on the position of like being as if I can't be present in this party and I know that it's going to be a little more escapey, I tend not to go out. And I think that being present in these spaces is just super helpful, important, and like really like healing.
Yeah, I think right now is a really good time for us to remember that. I mean, because I've worked a lot of events and booked a lot of events that had a lot of really extreme music, and a lot of it was profoundly unpleasant on purpose, and definitely not at all dance music. And I think that it's really important right now to recognize that we need to have more spaces like that. I don't know, but even in the world of dance music, I think there's always an opportunity to reflect on loss, reflect on grief, reflect on what's happening currently, and try to, because I've definitely had emotional experiences on dance floors where I would be sobbing over the loss of a friend or about the current political system or political climate, and I just even when it didn't seem like the music was appropriate for that kind of visceral reaction, and maybe it wasn't even the kind of event that was inviting that, but I've definitely been there, I've definitely experienced it, and I think we should try to curate that more moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's hard to sort of paint a specific kind of way that I feel like people should show up, because I think also everyone's definition of escapism is different, and also the idea of being present looks different and takes a lot of different shapes and forms, and I think we all have certain levels of different capacities that we can handle when dancing or just standing even, that obviously like takes a certain level of privilege to even be there and engage with, and yeah, I would say that it's hard because there are so many ways to experience music. And for example, I at some point at Wire Festival just had like a complete mental breakdown. I was just standing on like the main stage in the back, like literally sobbing, and I was like, I hope that no one saw that. And then the next day somebody posted an Instagram video of them dancing, and you catch me like a good 3 seconds of me walking by, like, and I was like, you could have just cropped me out. That was like 3 seconds in, but it's those moments where we should be unapologetic about the way that we hold ourselves in the space, and there's a certain level of like mindfulness that we all need to come with. But at the same time, I think music has such an array of impact that it's hard to exactly say what I feel like the crowd should or should not be doing. And I think that's kind of the beauty, is that everyone is going to come forward with a completely different approach and a different experience. And I think that sort of layer of chaos as well is sort of what makes like magic, and why I appreciate doing this is because I'm not gonna see any one night as the same, or any one set as the same, any one crowd as the same. Like it always shifts, and there's always ebbs and flows, and ultimately like that is what is so nice about sharing culture and fusing that, and even traveling and getting to see how different crowds react in different cultures and countries. Like that is the beauty of DJing, and I wouldn't expect anyone especially in a place where like I'm at a privilege to stand there and be playing for them, to act it accordingly. And yeah, that's why I was.
Well, hello. I'm hearing acceptance in chaos and just authenticity and expression in every single one of your guys' answers. And I just want to genuinely thank you guys for bringing just the authenticity, the truth, and just your opinions. And I see that they all come from really deep and informed places. So thank you, KYRUH. Thank you, January. Thank you, Soso. And thank you, Katie, for being here. Thank you, Kartik, for hosting. Thank you to the crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you.